Okay, hello guys. Here's a little introduction to two things that we talked about or said we would talk about in class a little bit more in depth. And we can go very deep into this, but we're just going to touch upon semiotics and deconstructionism. Um, so, uh, both of these theories have to do with how people get meaning from art, but also other ways that people communicate language, things like that. So, semiotics is a long traditional um, sort of index, although I maybe shouldn't use that word. You'll see why later. Of how meaning has been communicated over the years. So, Ferdinand de Saussure um, came up with the terminology to talk about what we would probably say in school is symbolism. But instead of using the word symbolism, he used sign and signified to describe how meaning is communicated from one person to another through things like words, but also pictures, images. So here we have a sign, which is this little illustration of a thundercloud, um, and it takes the place or stands in for an actual thundercloud. Um, so for us, we can say that the signified thing here is the cloud, but it could also mean things like danger or rain because rain comes from clouds. So he then went on, and others like him went on to start to classify how this happens. So he said that there were things that were kind of natural signs, and then that there were things that were artificial signs. And beyond that, again, we're just touching upon this. But a natural sign is indexical, which is why I probably shouldn't have said index. But it is a physical kind of representation of something, in this case, that has happened. Someone went through that snow, so we know that that person has gone through the snow because of the tracks that are left from that person. Artificial signs are invented by people. So the dove with the olive branch here might represent peace or the passing of a difficult moment in time for someone else. And we communicate those to each other over a series of events or years until the point where everybody kind of sees the dove with the olive branch and says, oh, that means peace. Okay? Um, then there are icons, and it goes on and on and on. Icons are depictions that look like the things. So we see these saints, and they are supposed to depict that person and look like that person, just like the thundercloud was supposed to look like a real thundercloud. Um, Arbitrary signs are signs that bear no resemblance to what they're trying to communicate, but we learn over time to interpret them that way. So you can see there's a little bit of overlap on some of this stuff because an artificial sign and an arbitrary sign seem like they could overlap. However, the dove looks like something, whereas this circle with a line through it tells us no, which we've learned because it's been communicated to us that that's what that little diagram means. So we're conditioned to understand them. So symbols then for de Saussure are put together by both real things or things that are iconic and indexical, or things that are arbitrary and artificial. So the no smoking sign, we understand, and we know it because we can see something that looks like a cigarette and that arbitrary symbol. So why do we have to learn about all this, and why was it important? And the quick answer is that just like learning a language would be helpful if you were going to a place where they spoke a different language, learning visual symbols or the layers of meaning that are a part of how people have communicated visually would be a good way to prepare yourself to try to survive, exist, and or communicate with other people. So you may be painting a still life and throw an apple in there just because you want something to practice painting. However, know that someone else might look at that and see something beyond the practice of painting because an apple means something to them, or an empty chair, or an empty cup. All these things are layered with meaning, and the more we know what those meanings are, the better chance we have to communicate with other people. Of course, in a way, people who are fascinated by this have a sense that there is a right way to interpret things, or at least ways that seem to make more sense than other ways. There are other people who would say that there is no definite right way of interpreting a piece of artwork. So those people, and people like Jacques Derrida, tell us that just because we've been conditioned to see things in certain ways doesn't mean that those things are free of bias, let's say. That everything that's communicated has some inherent bias to us, usually from the people who are in the position of power to be communicating, or maybe we could call them the winners, right? Uh, so winners could be military, could be social, could be political, could be intellectual. It could be anything. And those people that are communicating things to us and tell us that things mean a certain thing might have a bias based on the way that they were brought up, where they were brought up, or the kind of things that they're interested in to begin with. So, for deconstructionists, the way to start looking at understanding, or one way to start looking at understanding, is something called binary opposition. Uh, that we understand things as being good because there are things that are also bad. So if we know the condition of the person who's communicating good to us, then we can determine whether or not we agree with whether or not that person is communicating something that makes sense or seems true. So the cookie bug example is one way of understanding binary opposition. Say, for example, you were fed cookies your entire life. What a great life that would be, right? However, you, over the course of time, might develop a preference for one kind of cookie over another kind of cookie. And therefore, you might think that these are really good cookies, chocolate chip, and these are really bad cookies, Oreos, let's say, for example. However, somewhere in the future, someone offers you something other than a cookie, like a bug, and you eat the bug, and you realize that all cookies taste better than bugs, right? So the Oreo cookie that was bad now is not so bad because of your new experience. And as well, if you were offered only bugs to eat your entire life, and what a terrible life that would be, but you might have a preference for some bugs over other bugs. Like, ooh, I really like grasshoppers, but I hate ladybugs. Okay. But grasshoppers are terrific. Then one day, out of nowhere, someone offers you a cookie, and you realize that all cookies taste better than grasshoppers. So now grasshoppers aren't so good anymore. And there are millions of examples. People in caves that crawl out into the light. You've probably heard about that somewhere. Uh, and that they become blinded so that now when they come back to the cave, they seem to be foolish because they can't see anymore in the cave because they're no longer conditioned to it. That kind of scenario is all about binary opposition, and it's deconstructionist in its nature. So how does this affect visual artists? Well, it does, in terms of the kind of choices that we make about what kind of things we use to represent uh, different states of living or pleasure or what have you. And we see it all around us in terms of the way that we value things in life, right? So here's an example of a car that's shiny and new, right? But in addition to the car, we have this happy couple next to it. So we start to think that we want that car because we want to live like those happy people, right? When in fact, the car might not be the thing that makes us happy. It's being with that special other person. So language, art, religion, politics, money all play a part in forming assumptions of why we value things. Like we need money to be able to afford that car, which will make us happy, like those happy people that are there. And as we move forward, we would then say that some people might not value that car at all. So, according to semiotics, there could be a correct interpretation, but according to a deconstructionist like Derrida, there can really be no universal interpretation of things because it all depends on where you live, right? Maybe you live in the Siberia, and a convertible is not a great car for someone who lives in Siberia. They need something that's more reliable than that. So the meaning or the valuing of things could come from people's local circumstances, right? And therefore, trying to find out more about those people will help us interpret why they do or value the things that they do. Uh, Meaning can also change over time. When Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, it was a depiction of a person, right? But over the course of history, it's been put in a museum, it's been put behind bulletproof glass, it's been valued. Like if it went to auction, how much would it fetch nowadays? So when we look at the Mona Lisa, it no longer just represents this person, but it could represent things like excellence, money, love, and we could think about like why did he choose this person to paint or that sort of thing. So a deconstructionist would want to find out more about Leonardo in order to better understand the painting, but not just Leonardo. He would also want to know, or she would want to know more about the art world. So, who gets to decide? We all get to decide. Meaning and understanding comes from looking at art and literature, not from one perspective, according to a deconstructionist, but from many. And the more closely we look at those people, then we can figure out more about the assumptions or the biases that they have to have a greater understanding of why and what they are communicating to us. So here's the game. Who's the deconstructionist? And I could talk about universalism and pluralism for a long time, but I won't. We'll just say that a universalist has one set of rules that they apply to judging or looking at all art for art purposes. So they look at it and they decide if they like it based on what they know they value already. Whereas a pluralist would say, I need to know more about why this person made this quilt in order to understand whether they were successful in what they were trying to do. So they take many perspectives in order to come to a value judgment about things like art. So the deconstructionist is usually more of a pluralist, and someone who follows semiotics might be more like a universalist. In addition, we just got done with our postmodern project. A modernist who's constantly looking for new things in order to improve the world, but art as well, would be more in line with semiotics. Like if I want to understand things better, then I need to learn the story behind all these signs and what they signify. Whereas a postmodernist would look at it and say, oh, it could mean this to somebody who lives in Alaska, but it would mean something else to somebody who lives someplace where there's no running water or something like that. So trying to figure out where people are coming from is more of a postmodern idea, more of a deconstructionist idea. Um, and trying to just simply figure out what the meaning is a little bit more of a modernist idea. So the stop sign example is a good kind of summation of these theories about how to get meaning in your piece. And the reason we're talking about this is because that's something that we're going to try to push ourselves to do, right? Not just keep practicing and trying to make pretty pictures, but trying to insert some meaning in them. So if we look at the stop sign, even just by the shape of it, we know that it's telling us to stop our vehicle, right? And that would be kind of a semiotic way of analyzing what that means. Those letters mean it, the color means it, the shape of it means it. Um, we've seen it a million times. We've been conditioned to know to stop our vehicle. But a deconstructionist could say, well, there's a choice there, right? Like, I don't have to stop just because a sign puts that up. But if I do, does that mean that I have faith in government? No, like they put that up there to protect me because they want to protect me because they're good, right? And so I will follow that stop sign because I believe in the goodness of government and laws. Right? They could also say, I'm not going to stop because I don't think the government knows what's best for me. You know? That stop sign is going to make me late. So I have a lack of trust in the government, and therefore that stop sign, you know what it means to me? It means nothing. It means they're trying to control me. So we move forward. We think about whether or not we want to put an apple in our still life. What kinds of symbols or signs, icons are out there that we can use to put together ideas about it. And then as we look at other people's artwork too, we want to think about like, where is this person coming from? And what are they communicating to me? And does it have anything to do with what kind of person that person is? And as I break that down, I deconstruct it. And you'll hear that term if you continue to study art from others, not just me. So that was a whole heck of a lot. I'll leave it there for you guys, and we'll meet again later.